Okay, we're gonna get started here. First of all, welcome to the November meetup for PHP Limburg. Today we are Today we are sponsored by Aranere, who's going to give a quick intro to what they do and who they are right after this part. And we're also sponsored, of course, by Gabriel.
Doesn't work?
Nope.
No? Yeah.
Yes. So, normally at 6 we had our welcome and social. And then at 7 we're going to start the whole talk, but we had some technical difficulties. So Mike Simonson is going to talk to us about ORMs. And then at 8 we have a raffle, maybe some more announcements and social. And it's broken again. So, next month we're not going to do a meetup because of the holidays and the holiday season. But for January we are still looking for a venue, a speaker, and food and drinks. Same goes for February. So feel free to let us know. We're also going to send a little form around to all the members about possible talk proposals. Because there are people who are with some ideas for talks, but not sure, like, should I do it? On what level should I do it? So we're going to hear with the community what you all guys think that you need more out of the talks. Of course, nice to have, if you have raffle prizes, feel free to donate, or stickers. And I'm not sure if we still need the venue for the barbecue.
Yeah, for next year we're still maybe thinking of doing a barbecue with Brussels, maybe with Leuven and other meetups. We need to find a venue that's good in the area of Brussels or in the area of Leuven. I think that's a good meeting point for all of these meetups. So if you know anyone who could host this, that would be interesting.
Yeah. So we also have a joint in for after the talk. As soon as everything's done, we'll put the screen up again so you can give feedback. And that's about it. So I'm going to give Gunther the word. Totally came out wrong. So Gunther.
Yeah.
Gunther.
Or Chris, or both.
You're going to have to come here if you want to be in the video.
In the spotlight.
Oh, you changed it. Verder. Voilà. Dus goedenavond, welkom bij Aranere Internet en Design hier in Smart Space in Hasselt. In het verleden zijn we al heel vaak naar meetups gegaan, heel veel interessante mensen leren kennen, heel veel bijgeleerd. En je vond het wel als dringend tijd om zelf iets te organiseren. En nu dat wij in Smart Space zitten, kunnen we eigenlijk iets organiseren. We hebben een maand geleden nog de WordPress Limburg meetup georganiseerd, allereerste editie. En nu zitten we de beurt aan PHP Limburg. De eerste keer dat we hier zitten, misschien ook niet, of hopelijk niet de laatste. Maar voordat we gaan beginnen, gaan we Aranere nog heel kort even voorstellen. Dat we dat mogen. Hè.
Dat ga ik even doen. Aranere is eigenlijk een fusie van twee Limburgse bedrijven. Zijn de enerzijds Cryop Internet Services, en de meeste kennen Chris al. Vanuit het verleden. Chris heeft zijn zaak in 2008 opgericht in Maasmechelen en vooral gespecialiseerd in allerlei internetdiensten. Het tweede bedrijf, dat was mijn bedrijf, opgericht in 2014. Eigenlijk gekomen van grafisch bureau, omdat ik grafisch nogal sterk was en in een drukkerij werkte. Ooit op begonnen in bijberoep als grafisch ontwerper. En een applicatie ontwikkeld die Chris voor mij geschreven heeft en zo zijn we beginnen samenwerken. En dat heeft ervoor gezorgd dat wij Aranere waren of werden. Wat is nu het speciale van Chris en mij samen? Dat hebben wij aldoende geleerd. En dat is dat wij eigenlijk een heel goede soft skill en hard skill combinatie hebben. Wie welke skills heeft, dat gaan we niet uit de doeken doen. Maar de ene heeft heel goede hard skills en de andere heeft heel goede soft skills. Nu, ik hoop dat het allemaal heel duidelijk is voor iedereen wie hier de hard skills heeft. Dan jong enthousiasme en ervaring. Dat is ook voor ons wel een heel toffe. Dat is Chris, is toch een heel deel of een heel stukje jonger dan mijzelf. Dat jonge enthousiasme, dat drijft mij af en toe tot sneller beslissingen nemen. Maar andersom ook, Chris die zou al heel snel iets doen, terwijl dat ik door mijn ervaring af en toe die rem ga aantrekken. En dat is wel een goede blend ertussen. Complexiteit en eenvoud, ja. Developers, het zijn het zijn mensen die altijd in moeilijke situaties zitten. En ik probeer altijd die eenvoud en die complexiteit mee te krijgen.
Ik wil zeggen dat ik geen simpele ben.
Hij is geen simpele, maar van de andere kant proberen we iets moeilijk wel heel eenvoudig te maken en dat lukt ons ook meer. Doordat we met tweeën zijn, hebben we meer diensten aan te bieden en hebben we een betere servers. En het vijfde puntje is geen onbelangrijke, dat is online plus offline. We hebben destijds gemerkt dat het online eigenlijk niet zonder het offline verhaal kan. En een groot voorbeeld daarvan is Wijs, jullie alle bekend denk ik. Redelijk groot, of een heel groot webbureau dat een tijdje geleden ook een reclamebureau overgenomen heeft, gewoon omwille van het feit dat zij zien dat die mix tussen online en offline wel vrij belangrijk is. Het leuke daarvan is dat zij dat een maand of 3 geleden hebben aangekondigd en dat wij 2 jaar geleden de beslissing al genomen hadden. Dus het heeft eigenlijk wel een beetje een teken dat wij, tafelijk misschien voorlopers waren. Door de fusie hebben wij ook gekozen voor een nieuwe naam, nieuwe locatie. En vandaar dat we hier allemaal samen zitten. Nu ga ik Chris nog een paar van onze klanten, of een paar projectjes van een paar leuke klanten laten zien. Dat we ook, of dat jullie weten wat wij ongeveer, of waar dat wij mee bezig zijn. Eerste klant die we voorstellen, dat is Maison.
Ja, Maison is een fashion shop, een vrij grote fashion shop in België, gebouwd met Magento. Dus er is redelijk wat custom development in. En ook wel tof om te weten is dat zij begin dit jaar de B-Commerce Award hebben gewonnen voor beste fashion webshop. Voor Fanta exclusief. En daar zijn we nog altijd continu mee bezig om te verbeteren, nieuwe tools ontwikkelen, doorontwikkelen. Scalability is een belangrijke. Een andere toffe is een tool voor multimasters. Dat is eigenlijk een tool die wij ontwikkeld hebben, volledig maatwerk, waar dat wij tijdsregistratie aanbieden aan alle mensen die voor het bedrijf werken. Het zijn werknemers die heel veel op de baan zijn. Het is volledig geschreven in Laravel 5. En dit wat je nu ziet is een MVP, dus het is nog vrij basic. En dan derde kant is Monotode. Daar zijn we al een 3 tot 4 jaar voltijds voor aan het ontwikkelen. Monotode is eigenlijk een Amerikaanse start-up waar dat wij elke webshop ter wereld kunnen indexeren zonder dat wij een API of plugins of feeds nodig hebben. Daarbovenop hebben wij nog Amazon, Zalando en Bol.com gekoppeld. Dus we beschikken nu over een productdatabase van een paar 100 miljoen producten. En die kunnen we allemaal aanbieden in één unified checkout. Dus dit is bijvoorbeeld de Flair shop. Dan kun je die producten van verschillende webshops in één keer bestellen. En Flair krijgt in dit geval dan een commissie over die bestelling. Dus dat is volledig maatwerk. We gebruiken wel een paar frameworks, maar het is heel veel native PHP.
En dat waren ze.
Ja, dus we doen van alles, zoals je kunt zien.
Moesten er zelfs vragen zijn, dat is niet voor nu, maar dat is voor straks bij de borrel.
Ja.
Dankjewel.
Ja.
Waar staat de naam voor?
Het komt van Aranere, dat is Latijn voor spinnenweb. En omdat wij webdevelopers waren, zaten wij in dat webverhaal. En er zijn heel veel logo's met de spinnekip doorgekomen, maar dat gingen we dan toch maar niet doen, omdat bepaalde mensen misschien schrik gingen krijgen. Maar Chris die heeft wel ooit gezegd, er komt een tarantula op ons bureau, maar wanneer dat we dat gaan doen, dat weten we niet. Dus het komt van spinnenweb. Ja.
Een beetje moet een naam hebben. Hè.
Plus, we moeten er ook altijd bij zeggen van what's in a name, maar begin nu maar eens tegenwoordig een naam te zoeken waar dat alle domeinen nog van vrij zijn. Het is een hele moeilijke.
En je kunt ook woordspeling mee maken met lettertjes.
Oorspronkelijk wou ik het met geschreven letters, kon ik het zowel ondersteboven. Een ontwerper die gaat daar alles mee in de gang. En ik had een logo ontworpen waar je zowel ondersteboven als recht kon lezen. Maar dat vonden we dan beide toch niet zo goed en dan is het uiteindelijk toch nog een ander geworden.
Ja.
Goed, tot ziens.
Dank u wel.
Okay. Next up is Mike with his ORM talk, so give it up for Mike.
Come on, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. So I'm Mike Simonson on Twitter. I'm a web developer working at Cube Solution with Gabriel, if you want to work with nice people. And whenever I'm not behind my computer, you can probably find me hiking or climbing somewhere in the nature. Just before I start this talk, I'd like to know who of you has never used any ORMs? Never ever?
No.
Really? Any reason?
I like to write my own queries.
Okay.
I'm doing mostly front-end work.
Queries from front-end, that's interesting. Okay. Does any of you know the Doctrine ORM? I guess you are mostly using PHP. Okay. So, the main reason for this talk was a discussion I had with another colleague about ORMs and their issue, and while the discussion was going, we started looking up for a article on the internet, and we started seeing titles like those all over the place. I think just by typing ORM are crap, you get like 15 million results. It struck me as really odd, in the sense that an ORM is a tool, and like every tool, it can be used for good or for a very bad reason. And our job, to me, is to find a good tool for the good job. Obviously, in most of those articles, you can find people that are complaining that they wanted a screwdriver and they used a hammer and it didn't do what they expected, and it's certainly because the tool is totally crappy. Well, still, the idea of this talk is to try to give you a better overview of when an ORM can be useful and when it shouldn't be used. Everything is a trade-off. That's basically the shortcut for my talk. I'm not going to try to sell you Doctrine or any other ORM, because Doctrine is mostly built on top of, I mean, not on top, but on the lessons learned with Hibernate, which is a Java ORM that is very, very popular. But it doesn't mean because it's popular and it's used in pretty much every Java EE application that it should be used everywhere. When you get a new project with a new application to build, wait a second. I don't think those are the... Okay. I'm not sure that it was the proper order for the slide, but we'll do with it. So, when you need to make a choice about a new application, am I going to use an ORM for it or am I not going to use an ORM? Most people, when you talk with them, it's to them it's a question of love or hate of the tool, and not really a question of is it appropriate for the job here. Most of the argument that you will see are it's always good for that or it's always bad for that. And again, to me, that's a really wrong way of asking yourself the question. I found that sentence to be much more appropriate when you need to make an architecture design decision. That the goal is to let yourself convince by the good arguments, not just getting convinced by any argument. The point of an ORM, obviously, is to access a database, which is to say that you have data in your application and you want to save it any other way. And right now, pretty much 90% of the application that you will find will use, one way or another, a relational database. There are reasons for this that we're going to go about, but that's the state of the art right now. And when you have a relational database, you have different way of accessing the data that's contained in it, that you put yourself in it. The most barebone one would be to just like query the database yourself, like you said. You just issue the SQL statement directly via driver to the database. That's in PHP, that's PDO, or you can use even a library to abstract the difference between the different database for you, but it's still like a direct access to the database. And then to try to abstract that, there are different type of architecture that you can use, different type of ORMs. One of the first type is called the active record. Then you also have the data mapper, which is another kind of ORM. And if your application needs it, you can even look at even higher level of abstraction on top of your data, which might be, for instance, event sourcing. Now, the question is, how are you going to make the decision which one you are going to use? For that, and also to explain why we are mostly talking about relational database here tonight, I'm going to go very, very briefly on some specific dates in the computer history. We can start the history at pretty much the first real computer as the ENIAC, which is in 43, which was like designed in 43 and not completed, but whatever. Which is the first computer that could do everything electronically. So yeah, it depends a bit how you see it, but it's let's say a date range more than precise here. Then Lisp, which is one of the first language that was called an object-oriented language, was created in 58. C is 72. Smalltalk, which is another, let's say, one of the first very popular object-oriented language, is in 72. In the same decade, there was Multics, the first product, the first relational database that was sold as a product. And C++ is 83, just at the beginning of the next decade. Why am I pointing C++ here? Because it's, to some people, it was the language that popularized object-oriented, that really made it accessible to most of the programmers. Why those data are important to me? Because the idea is to show you that the concept of relational database and object-oriented are quite old, and they came out relatively in the same years. I mean, back in the days, it wasn't like with the JavaScript framework nowadays that pop up every other week. So you have to take into account that it took much longer to go from one technology to the next one. But for the era, it's quite close. The other reason is to explain you that by the time object-oriented was really used by a lot of people, relational databases were old and working quite well compared to other solutions that you could have used to store the data that came in your object-oriented application, whatever that application was. So it was a reliable choice and a proven choice in terms of performance. Like, people had already used it, and you knew that some stuff were possible and scalable, and some other not, which might not have been the case of other tools. So, why am I trying to explain all of that? It's mostly because one of the first things that you are going to hear about ORMs and why they are bad is the impedance mismatch problem. I don't know if anyone has heard that word before. No one? Okay. So when you live in your code in your object-oriented code, you have objects that have relation to each other, and you need to find a way to store those objects, but also the relation between those objects. And if you need to do that on file, for instance, let's say you just want to store those objects in plain files, it's relatively easy to find a way to store the data of each object in a specific file for each object. That's relatively easy to do. But then if you need to store the relationship between those objects, it becomes a little bit more complicated. And when you start to need to make queries on those relations, you will realize really fast that it doesn't scale very well. It's pretty much the idea of trying to put a square in a circle. It just doesn't work. When you look at the relational database, you have table and you have foreign keys. When you look at the object world, you have object and just pointer to other objects. And that's where you get the problem. You need a way to translate those pointer into foreign keys or link table in a relational database. And even though it might look easy, it comes with its whole set of own problems. That's basically why some people talk about the ORMs as being the Vietnam of computer science. It looks easy on the surface, but there are a lot of edge cases. So that's the problem of the impedance mismatch, that there is no direct translation from tables and link tables and foreign keys to an object and pointer. So that might mean that ORMs are not a very, very good tool. I mean, why would you try to fit that data into that relational table if it just doesn't fit? Like, aren't there other tools that are better suited for that? And there were tools that were claiming to be better for that, namely object databases. I don't know if any of you know some object databases. There are a few now that are becoming quite popular, but I cannot find their name anymore. It's not really important, but the idea is that, like object databases, there is one that is very not those kind of objects. So I'm not talking about Mongo. I'm talking about I will look it up after the talk and give you the precise name. But the idea is that those databases work much more like an object. They basically have pointer to other objects. Maybe Mongo work like that, but I don't know Mongo, so. So yeah, Neo4j, that's the one. Thank you. So those tools, they work like the object. They have pointer to other objects in their database, and that means that there isn't any impedance mismatch, and it's much easier to just store and retrieve data in an object-oriented world with those databases. Now, why those databases like Neo4j and the previous one that existed at the creation of the object-oriented world weren't used in production? Mostly because even though there are some stuff that they do very well, there are other stuff at which they are totally horrendous and basically cannot compete with relational databases. If you try to make queries on the relationship, it's not going to work. If you try to make queries on relationship in a way that wasn't envisioned when you created the database, you're screwed again. That's basically the only reason why people choose relational database. They choose relational database because even though they were totally not adapted, they could be tailored for any use case, and they could be scaled for any use case. There wasn't any use case with the relational database where the performance would be horrendous and you would have absolutely no solution. So that's basically the reason why we needed ORMs. We needed ORMs because object database were not on par for performance reasons. So obviously that's only concern you if you are using any object-oriented code, which is probably dominant now, but it's not the case for everyone. And it also only concerns you if you are using any of the many relational databases that are also dominant now. But as Gabriel pointed out, there is Mongo and a lot of other data store that are not relational, and that might just avoid you the need for any ORM at all. I already explained you why we needed to do the mapping and what the impedance mismatch was. So the biggest benefit that you get when you're using an ORM is that in the code that is providing value for your customer, you don't need to care about the way you are storing your data. You are just concerned about your business use case and what the client wants to achieve with the application, and you separate totally the part that is about just storing the data. It's very interesting if clean code is important for you, if you want to make sure that you have if your use cases are, for instance, quite complex and you don't want to pollute them with concerns that only relates to saving data, that might be like a good reason to go for an ORM. Other concerns that you might have might be related to the security. For that concern, I mostly don't see any point why you wouldn't use any ORM or any. Let's keep it even to just a database access layer library. If you use a database access layer library, and that database, like all those that I checked, use a prepared statement, you're already putting yourself at ease for 99% of the security problem that you might encounter with your SQL statement. If you want to do everything by hand yourself, then you have to keep in mind for everything that you do that you have that security concern. You cannot pass any data coming from your store or from the user directly into that query if you don't escape it properly. And it's a really tricky job. SQL is a quite complex language. It's really, really hard to master the proper escaping of queries without using prepared statement. There are more edge cases than I can count. And if you use an ORM or a database access layer library that use prepared statement, because most of the ORM already have their own database access layer library that use prepared statement, you're just getting that level of security for free. On the performance concern of an ORM, often people ask me when they should start to look at other options than an ORM. And my main cornerstone to know that is just to look at what the application is trying to achieve. If your application is mostly data bound, like you are making calculation, statistics, or just purely mangling data, I don't really see a good reason to use an ORM. Now, if you are in a situation where there is a lot of behavior in the object that you are using in your application, then you will be better off probably using an ORM and using object-oriented code all the way with the ORM. Why am I using that cornerstone? It's basically when you look at the history of web application, you can see that a few years ago, like 10 years ago, there were a bunch of applications that had pretty much everything into the database. Gigantic triggers or function that were sending mail inside the database server because it could do it, so why not do it? And very, very fast people realized that it wasn't a very good idea. I don't know any of those applications that is still developed now. They basically all disappeared. And there is a reason for that. Databases are very good at storing data and mangling that data, not at encapsulating behavior. That's also like one of the main benefits of object-oriented design. The idea is that you try to encapsulate the behavior. If you don't have any behavior, you won't have any advantage using object-oriented code design, let's say. But if you have a lot of behavior, you can, if you design your application properly, you can use that at your advantage and benefit from it. And in those circumstances, using an ORM is probably easier than trying to fit everything in one place. Application type, I just said it. Another concern is about the ORM or the complexity or the simplicity of them. To that, like every abstraction, because an ORM is an abstraction, it's an abstraction, it adds complexity, it's a new abstraction that you need to learn. And it's also like every abstraction, it has a performance penalty that you can never completely overcome. For that, I would say it's really a matter of taste. If you just need to hack a little application for like an event in 2 weeks and that is never going to be used again. Just use the tool that you know the best, and it's probably not going to be an issue. If you know an ORM or an active record library very well, just use that. Use what you know, hack it really well, and you will be done with it. Now, if your goal for that little project is to learn something new, then yeah, you can also try to learn something new, but it definitely comes at a price. You can put them on a scale, and I would say that the active record is definitely the simplest of the ORM pattern that you can use. It's not flexible, but it's very fast if you need to hack something quickly. Then you will have the data mappers that are a little bit more complex because you have more stuff to configure. Let's say all the configuration of the ORM that is done automatically and that is not flexible in an active record pattern is flexible in a data mapper pattern, but it means that you have to do it yourself. It can be justified if, for instance, you are not the one that is designing the database and you have to match a schema that already exists. That's something that you won't be able to do with an active record pattern, but that is going to be possible with a data mapper pattern. And if you need even more flexibility, because, for instance, you know that you are going to see the application evolve for a very long time, and you want to invest in it to make sure that you are not going to have to rewrite it completely in a few years, you can look at a different pattern, like for instance event sourcing. If you know that your application will benefit from it, do you know? Does everyone know what event sourcing is? First, I only see one head shaking. Okay, event sourcing. The idea of event sourcing is that instead of cornering yourself in a CRUD situation, so in a situation where you are basically just filling forms and storing those forms in a table and then retrieving that data and staying in that very, very fixed schema, event sourcing wouldn't make any sense in those kind of contexts. It's way too complex for just that. But if you're not in that situation and you don't know what kind of form, what kind of things you are going to ask to your customer, if you have a lot of historical data that is very sensitive. For instance, you are a bank and you manage transaction and you don't want to lose a transaction, you don't want to end up miscalculating the balance on an account because you don't want to give money for free to your client. That's not something they do. If you want to be able to prove the state of your application now, like if you were doing accounting, for instance, then event sourcing might make sense. What's the idea of event sourcing is that instead of storing the current status of the data in your application, which is what a CRUD application will do, you are just storing what is happening in the application. Oh, someone made a transaction from that account to that account. And you store that information in what is called an append-only data store. It's basically a log of everything that happened in the application. And the very interesting property of that log is that it never ever changes. You can cache the information forever if you want. You can just replay everything. If you want to know the amount of money that's on a particular account, you just replay all the events that concern that account. Like someone added €100, then 300, then remove 200. You can replay every event that happened to the account and end up with the correct balance on it. Why is that important in that kind of application? First, for legal reason, in the case of bank, of accounting. But even when you are not in one of those cases where it's a legal requirement to be able to explain how you ended up to that number, the big advantage that you get when you only store what is going on in your application is that the next time that you create a new reporting screen, for instance, or a new feature that needs to know what happened in the past to be able to show information, like basically, for instance, a Facebook feed. If you are in a CRUD system, you just create the feature and it's blank for everyone. If you are in an event sourcing kind of situation, you can just calculate the status for everyone with the data because you know what happened, and your new feature will look much better and will be much more useful because you can use it right away. You are not in the situation that, oh, now I'm storing that data that I wasn't tracking before, and I have to wait for a certain amount of that data to be for the feature to be meaningful for the customers. So that's the idea of event sourcing, just storing events. Obviously, it's much more complex than a simple CRUD application, but in certain scenario, it can justify itself. What?
It jumped out, I think.
Sorry. So, yeah, it's just a matter of complexity, and to me another cornerstone is like, how long do you want or do you know that you will have to maintain that application? If it's an application that is dying in 6 months for whatever reason, or that you know, that you won't have to maintain for long, why invest that amount of effort? Except if you want to learn event sourcing, it's really hard to justify. But now, if you know that application is gonna be maintained for a while, or that the business depends on it, then it's another set of trade-off, basically. Another reason to use an ORM is basically to leave the boring part to someone else. Why would you want to write all those select queries and all those delete queries and all those update queries that are so similar? They're just boring to write. Every time something in the application will change, you will have to maintain them. That's also, to me, a very good reason to use an ORM. Everything that you write yourself, instead of letting the ORM generate the code for it, you will have to maintain. And that's a much bigger problem than just learning a new tool. Often, when you have those kind of discussion with people, it feels like it's either way you're using an ORM everywhere in your application, or you are not touching one and you are doing everything directly using SQL queries. That's also something that I don't really understand, because you will always have some part of your application that are going to be more reporty-like, And trying to do reporting with an ORM would be really crazy. They're just basically not designed for that. The goal of the ORM, like it was said on the previous slide, is to take care of the 80 to 90% of the really, really boring SQL queries that are super easy to automate. And it's never going to give you a blank card like, oh, you don't need to know SQL now. Like, if you use an ORM, you still need to know how SQL works, and you will need to use SQL in your application, most probably. Yeah, I just don't really understand why. It looks like people want a magic solution for all of their problem, and that's not what the ORM are designed for. So use it for the part where it's appropriate in the application, namely the CRUD part. That's where they shine the most. But if you have, reporting feature in your application, they're just not designed for that. There is no other way to say it. Another interesting concept of the ORM is that you will often also see people that are complaining about the fact that ORM are a bad abstraction because they are leaky and blah, blah, blah. They're designed to be leaky. I heard someone call it a detachable abstraction and use the analogy of a car. Like, you want the ORM to be like a car where you just most of the time have not to do anything and the car will just run fine. But if you need to change the oil, you don't need to wield on the car to change the oil. You can just open, not the hatch, but the hood, put some oil, close the hood, and it's done. The ORM are designed the exact same way. The people who designed ORM know that they are not able to cover 100% of the use case. So they just give you ways to hook into them to deal with those other cases that would become totally hairy if you try to do them purely using the ORM. We already spoke about the lifespan of the project and the maintenance cost. Design the interface that you want to use. To me, that's a pet peeve, but again, that's something that you have to that depends on the project that you have. But when the project is complex and has a lot of behavior, I like to be able to design the object for the use case of the client, for the domain of the client. And you don't want to be polluted by other concern. Generally, the business of the client is complex enough so that you don't want to add more complexity to it. If you can leave out the persistence out of it and leave it in another dedicated place for it, you are usually better off. That's one of the power of the ORMs that I personally like. There are slides missing. So other use case that I've heard that I didn't knew and that I find interesting about ORMs is the way they allow you to test your application. I have a friend who is working on an application that basically manage all the cattle in the Benelux. So they have to connect to a lot of different databases in a lot of different systems that belong to the government of Holland or the government of Belgium and Luxembourg. And that's something that would be really hard to do if they didn't have any abstraction for SQL or for the databases. Because in their case, they basically use every database that I know but MySQL. They have Postgres, Microsoft SQL, Sybase, and probably other stuff. And when they have a bug in their application, thanks to the ORM, they can just serialize the object that caused the bug, because in their case, it's often because a certain combination of value wasn't expected. They just serialize the object, put it in a test case, and they can reproduce the bug really easily like that. The ORM also allow them to just use SQLite to regenerate all the schema that those objects are going to touch, so that the test can run, fail, and then they can fix it. That's something that would basically be impossible if you needed to, every time you do a test case, check which database. Is it caused by a problem in the database abstraction layer, or is it caused by the data itself? That's already something that you would need to check. Then you would need to adapt your code for every test. It would probably be horrendous. And yeah, I basically didn't know that it was that easy to do that kind of case. In their case, they are using Python, so the ORM is called Elixir, I think. And I found that quite interesting. Another thing that another sentence, let's say, that's stuck with me is the fact that design, like event sourcing, are always technically superior, because they give you much more freedom, and they allow you to do whatever you did not even thought that you would need for later, but they are not always practically relevant. Like, all projects have deadlines, they have a certain amount of money that you can spend on them, and it would be totally stupid to try to even source everything. It just wouldn't work. It's basically a question of money. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have any question. None at all?
What's your favorite ORM?
It depends for what. I would say I probably know Doctrine the most, because I'm one of the contributors of Doctrine. But it doesn't mean that it's the best. Even in the PHP world, there are other ORMs, like Eloquent, for instance, which is more not a data mapper, but an active record kind of ORM. But yeah, if I need somehow tomorrow to do an application that's just sending a few thousands of mail of people that are like subscribing, using Eloquent would be probably saving me a few minutes compared to using Doctrine for a simple application like that, like once the mail are sent, the application is just returning. You don't really need to spend time. I mean, except if you want to learn Doctrine, but yeah. Okay. Any other question? Yeah, I hope this was informative to you, and have a nice evening.
Okay. So, thank you, Mike, for the presentation. If any of you want to do a presentation, feel free to talk to us. If you want help, if you're not certain about the topic or anything, just feel free to talk to us and we'll help you out. Okay, next I think we have some raffles.
Yeah, what we're gonna do, I think, is PHP Storms is something we used to raffle. We don't have it anymore, and it used to be what we were using as a gift for whoever gave feedback. I think this time we're gonna give the Pluralsight subscription to someone who is interested in learning something and therefore will give some feedback on this talk, right? So I think that would be a raffle for tonight in that sense, if that makes sense. Yeah?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So guys, if you go to join.in, you are going to find our event. There you can find the talk. And the system there, for those who are new, will help Mike receive some feedback from you regarding the talk. Did you understand what he said? Did you have some ideas about how he could improve, I don't know, the slides or whatever? Anything that you find interesting. And even though you may think that your feedback is not going to be interesting to him, it is. Any feedback, even if you just give a star rating and no text, it actually helps a lot for the speaker. I know that Mike is applying to several conferences so that he can speak about these topics, so he needs this feedback to improve, and we also need good speakers like him to continue coming, speakers who can speak at conferences, so feel free to do that. It would be really nice. Whoever gives feedback is going to enter the raffle, and then we're going to just randomly choose a winner from there for the plural-size subscriptions. And another thing I wanted to mention is Mike prepared this talk with extremely little lead time. So thank you for that, Mike. He came with like 2 weeks notice, and it's very hard to prepare the talk with such a little time, so really appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's about it. Have fun. There's still sandwiches left. There's some booze left. Let's socialize.
Yay.
Ja.